The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between grocery store coupons and a water bill. But unlike the junk mail I usually tossed without a second glance, this one had my son's return address on it. Handwritten, formal, and when I opened it, my hands started to tremble. It wasn't a letter from my son. It was a legal document. A family wealth consolidation agreement, whatever that meant. And at the bottom, right above a blank signature line with my name typed beneath it, was a handwritten note in unfamiliar cursive. Mom, Stephanie, and I think this is best for everyone. Please sign and mail back. Love, David. But that wasn't my son's handwriting. I set down my coffee and read the document again. Slower this time. Words jumped out at me like warning signs. Pre-inheritance disclosure. Estate consolidation. Joint family trust management. And buried in paragraph after paragraph of legal jargon was a single, devastating request. I was being asked to reveal all my assets and agree to transfer them into a trust controlled by my son and his wife of 6 months, Stephanie. I walked to the window and looked out at the oak tree my late husband Harold planted 30 years ago. He'd been gone for 2 years now, and not a day passed when I didn't miss him. But in that moment, I was grateful he wasn't here to see this. Because what Stephanie didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Harold had left me far more than a house and some furniture. His life insurance, his investments, the patents from his engineering work, it all added up to $4.5 million. I'd kept it quiet, moved it into accounts under my maiden name, told no one, not even David. Harold had warned me before he died. People change when money's involved, he'd said, his voice weak but his eyes sharp. Even the ones you love. Protect yourself first. I thought he was being paranoid. Now I understood he was being wise. I didn't sign the document. I didn't call David either. Instead, I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Helen Chen, who'd handled Harold's estate with the discretion of a Swiss banker. Margaret, she said after I explained. This document is designed to look like standard estate planning, but it's essentially asking you to hand over control of everything you own. I figured as much. The question is, does David know what he's asking you to sign? That was the question that kept me up all night. My son had always been trusting, sometimes too trusting. He'd met Stephanie at a conference in Miami, married her 4 months later in a beachside ceremony I wasn't invited to until the last minute. She was beautiful, charming, always saying the right things, but her eyes never quite matched her smile. I decided to find out exactly what was going on. But I wasn't going to do it by confronting anyone. I was going to set a trap. Helen and I spent the next 3 days creating what she called a smokescreen estate, a fake will, a dummy investment account with $180,000 in it, enough to seem like my entire savings, but not enough to seem suspicious. Bank statements that looked real but led to accounts that were essentially empty. We scattered breadcrumbs, making it look like I'd spent most of Harold's insurance on medical bills and home repairs. If someone goes digging, Helen said, this is what they'll find. And if they try to access it, she smiled, they'll trigger about 5 different fraud alerts. I left the fake documents in my home office, not hidden but not obvious either, the kind of careless placement a 70-year-old widow might make. Then I waited. 3 days later, Stephanie called. Her voice was honey-sweet, the way it always was when she wanted something. Mom, we've been so worried about you, she said. I noticed she'd started calling me Mum right after the wedding, though I'd never invited her to. David and I were thinking, you really shouldn't be alone in that big house. What if something happened? I've lived here for 35 years, I said. I think I can manage. Of course. But we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we all sat down together? Talk about the future, you know, with the legal stuff. You mean the document you sent me? A pause, just a beat too long. David sent that. He's just trying to look out for you. Uh-huh. Well, tell David I'd love to have dinner. How about Saturday? I'll cook. She agreed a little too eagerly. When I hung up, I knew exactly what they were planning. They were going to come into my home, sit at my table, eat my food, and then pressure me into signing away my future. What they didn't know was that Helen would be listening from the next room, and every word would be recorded. Saturday came. I spent the morning preparing Harold's favorite pot roast, the one I used to make for family holidays. The irony wasn't lost on me. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. David came in first, and my heart cracked, just looking at him. He was thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes. He hugged me, but it felt mechanical, rehearsed, like he was playing a role. Stephanie walked in behind him, all smiles and perfume. She handed me a bottle of wine that probably cost less than the wrapping paper it came in. "For you, Mum. Your favourite." It wasn't my favourite. She'd never asked what my favourite was. We sat down to dinner. Small talk at first. The weather, their jobs, the traffic. Then, as I was clearing the salad plates, Stephanie dropped the first bomb. "Margaret, we've been doing some thinking about your situation." My situation? Living alone, managing finances. It's a lot for someone your age. She smiled sympathetically. "We just want to make sure you're protected." I set the plates down carefully. "Protected from what?" "From yourself, honestly." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I work in financial planning. You wouldn't believe how many how many seniors get taken advantage of. Scammers, bad investments, even family members sometimes." "Is that so?" "That's why we sent the consolidation agreement. It's really just a way for David to help manage things, take some of the burden off your shoulders." I looked at my son. He was staring at his plate, jaw tight. "David, is this what you want?" He hesitated. Stephanie's hand found his under the table. I saw her squeeze. "Mum, it makes sense," he said finally. "You're not getting younger. And, after Dad died, well, we just want to make sure everything's handled properly." "Everything, meaning my money." "Your assets," Stephanie corrected smoothly. "Your house, your savings, whatever Dad left you. It should be in a trust. Protected. Managed by people who understand finance." She gestured to herself modestly. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Well, here's the thing. I'm afraid there isn't much to manage." Stephanie's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "Harold's medical bills took most of his insurance. The house has a reverse mortgage on it." "And my savings," I sighed. "About $180,000. Maybe a little less." The room went quiet. I watched Stephanie's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked a lot like rage before settling into forced sympathy. "Oh, Margaret," she said. "I had no idea. David told me your husband was quite successful." "He was. But success doesn't mean much when cancer's involved. The treatments, the specialists, the experimental drugs, it ate through everything." David looked up at me. And for a moment, I saw my real son behind his eyes. Confused. Hurt. "Mom, you never told me it was that bad. I didn't want to worry you. You were planning your wedding." Stephanie stood abruptly. "I need to use the restroom." She left without waiting for directions, which told me she'd already memorized the layout of my house. As soon as she was gone, David leaned forward. "Mom, is this true? About the money?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Sweetheart, when did you last look at your bank accounts?" "Really look at them?" He frowned. "Stephanie handles the finances. She's better at that stuff than I am." "Check them. Tonight. Promise me." Before he could respond, Stephanie returned, her smile firmly back in place. "Well, this changes things. Maybe we should hold off on the trust for now. No point in complicating your taxes for such a small amount." I nodded, playing along. "That makes sense." They left shortly after, citing an early morning. Stephanie kissed my cheek at the door, her lips cold. "We'll talk soon, Mom. Take care of yourself." The moment their car pulled away, Helen emerged from the guest bedroom. "I got everything," she said, holding up her phone. "Including her little trip to your office." She searched it, took photos of every document in your desk, the fake bank statements, the dummy will, all of it. "Good." I smiled grimly. "Now we wait." We didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I got an alert from the bank. Someone had attempted to access my decoy account using credentials that could only have come from the forged documents Stephanie had photographed. The attempt was made from an IP address traced to my son's apartment. She'd taken the bait. I called David immediately. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then I got a text from Stephanie's phone. "David's busy. Please stop calling. He'll reach out when he's ready." My heart sank. She was isolating him, controlling the narrative. By the time I finally heard from my son, he'd probably believe I was the villain. Sure enough, 3 days of silence later, David finally called. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Mom, Stephanie told me what you did. What I did? She said you've been hiding money, that you lied about being broke, that you're trying to manipulate us. I closed my eyes. David, listen to me carefully. Have you checked your own accounts? Looked at your credit cards? Seen where your money's been going? Stephanie handles all that, I told you. And you trust her completely? She's my wife. So was Jennifer, his first wife, who'd left him with $40,000 in debt and a broken heart. You trusted her too. The line went quiet for a long moment. That's different. Is it? David, I'm not your enemy. I'm your mother. And I'm begging you, just look. Look at your accounts. Look at your credit report. If everything's fine, I'll apologize. But please, just look. He hung up without promising anything. The next week was the longest of my life. I didn't hear from David. Didn't see him. Helen advised me to stay patient, to let the evidence do the work. But every day of silence felt like a knife in my chest. Then, on a Thursday evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my son standing on my porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. "Can I come in?" His voice cracked. I pulled him inside and sat him down at the kitchen table. "What happened?" "You were right." He could barely get the words out. I checked. Finally got into the accounts. She's been siphoning money for months. Credit cards I didn't know existed. A second mortgage on our condo. She even took out a loan in my name for $75,000. I had no idea, Mom. I had no idea. I held him while he cried. My grown son, sobbing like he was 5 years old again. And while I wanted to say I told you so, I didn't. Because that's not what a mother does. When he finally calmed down, he looked at me with haunted eyes. "There's more. I found emails on her computer. She's been talking to her sister about your money, planning how to get you to sign things over. They called it the retirement project." "I know," I said gently. "I've known for a while." "How?" I told him everything. The fake documents, the trap, Helen recording the dinner, the failed attempt to access my decoy account. With each revelation, his face shifted from shock to shame to something else entirely. Determination. "I want a divorce," he said. "But she'll fight it. She'll take everything I have left. Not if we're smart about it." I slid a folder across the table. Inside was everything Helen had compiled. The recordings, the IP traces, the fraudulent loan applications, the emails his wife had sent her sister. We have enough here to bury her. But it has to be handled carefully. David looked through the folder, his jaw tightening with each page. "She signed my name on some of these. That's forgery." "Yes, it is. I could press charges." "You could. Or," I paused, choosing my words carefully, "you could offer her a choice. Walk away clean. No spousal support, no claims on any property, or face criminal prosecution." He looked up at me. "You've thought this through." "I've had time to think." The confrontation happened 4 days later, at Helen's office. Stephanie walked in expecting a mediation session about the family trust misunderstanding. What she got was something very different. Helen laid out the evidence piece by piece. The forged loan documents, the recorded conversation from dinner, the IP logs showing she'd tried to access my accounts, the emails to her sister detailing her plan to strip my family of everything we had. Stephanie's face went through every stage of denial, from outrage to deflection to threats to bargaining. When she realized none of it was working, when she saw that we had her completely cornered, she finally went quiet. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. David slid the divorce papers across the table. "Sign these. No contest. You walk away with what you brought into the marriage, nothing more. You don't contact me, my mother, or anyone in my family ever again. And if I don't?" Helen opened another folder. "Then these documents go to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. Identity theft, fraud, attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person." She said that last part with particular emphasis, and I saw Stephanie flinch. "You'd be looking at several years in prison, plus civil liability." Stephanie stared at the papers for a long time. Then, slowly, she picked up the pen and signed. When it was done, she stood and looked at me with pure hatred. "You planned this from the beginning." "No," I said calmly. "I just paid attention. Something my son should have done before he married you." She left without another word. After she was gone, David sat in silence for a long moment. Then he turned to me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have seen what she was. You loved her. Love makes us blind sometimes. You weren't blind. You saw through her immediately. I shook my head. I was suspicious, that's all. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to recognize when someone's being too perfect. Real people have flaws. They make mistakes. They don't say exactly what you want to hear all the time. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Mom, about the money. The real money. How much did Dad actually leave you? I looked at him for a long time, thinking about Harold's warning, thinking about what this whole ordeal had taught me, thinking about whether my son was ready to know the truth. Enough, I finally said. Enough to be comfortable. Enough to help you if you ever really need it. But David, listen to me. That money is mine to manage. When I'm gone, it'll be yours. But right now, in this moment, you don't need to know the number. You need to rebuild your life. Get out of debt. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I expected him to argue, to demand to know. Instead, he nodded slowly. You're right. I spent so long letting other people handle things for me. Jennifer handled things. Then Stephanie. Maybe it's time I figured out how to handle them myself. I smiled, and for the first time in months, it was genuine. That's the smartest thing you've said in years. We had dinner that night at my house. Just the 2 of us, like it used to be before the weddings and the wives and the complications. I made chicken parmesan, his favorite from childhood. We talked for hours about nothing and everything. His plans to start over, his regrets, his hopes. When he was leaving, he hugged me at the door and held on for a long time. Thank you, Mom, he said into my shoulder, for seeing what I couldn't, for protecting me, even when I didn't deserve it. I pulled back and looked at my son. Really looked at him. He wasn't the confident man who'd walked into my house 6 months ago with a stranger on his arm. He was wounded, humbled, uncertain, but he was also real. More real than he'd been in years. You always deserve protecting, I said. That's what mothers do. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, listening to the silence of the house. The oak tree outside the windows swayed in the evening breeze, its leaves rustling like whispers. I thought about Harold, about the wisdom he'd given me that I'd once dismissed as paranoia, about the $4.5 million sitting safely in accounts that no one knew about the close call we'd just survived. I thought about what the comments on stories like mine always say, that parents don't owe their children explanations about their finances, that inheritance is a gift, not a right. That money reveals who people really are. All of it was true. But here's what I learned, that no comment section can capture. Protecting your family isn't just about protecting your money. It's about protecting yourself enough to still be there when they need you. It's about being strong enough to see the truth even when love tries to blind you. I picked up my phone and texted Helen. Thank you for everything. Dinner next week? My treat. She replied within minutes. You buying means the decoy account actually had money in it. I knew you were holding back. I laughed, alone in my kitchen, for the first time in what felt like forever. Outside, the oak tree stood solid and unmoving, its roots deep in soil my husband had tended for decades. Some things, I realized, are worth protecting at any cost. Family is one of them, the real ones anyway. Before I went to bed that night, I pulled out a small notebook from my nightstand. The one Harold had given me years ago, filled with his handwriting. Notes about investments, warnings about people, advice for a future he knew he wouldn't see. On the last page, he'd written something I'd read 100 times but never truly understood until now. The ones who love you don't need to know what you have. They love you anyway. The ones who need to know are the ones you need to watch out for. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. Thank God I never told anyone about the money, because now I knew exactly who would have come for it. And I'd be ready if anyone ever tried again.